My name is Howard Libet, and I'm Executive Director of the Baltimore Jewish Council. On behalf of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, the Baltimore Jewish Council, the Jewish Museum of Maryland, and the Center for Jewish Education, I am honored to welcome you to this, the 2020 Community Commemoration of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. As you know, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was necessary to cancel our traditional program. However, as we are committed to Holocaust remembrance, we've created this virtual program which, after this premiere, will be available on the Baltimore Jewish Council's website and across our community's online resources. We realize there are people in our community without internet access, many of whom are Holocaust survivors. We ask that you share this program with them. Thank you for your continuing support and commitment to Holocaust education and remembrance. Representing our parent agency today is Deborah Weinberg, Chair of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore.
And I'm here as part of a virtual commemoration for Yom HaShoah, the day that we recall the dark period in our history. It was a tragic time for all humanity. And today, as I am here in my own home, I still think about the collective, our collective responsibility to each other. I think about and honor those people like Sal Goldstein, the liberators, and I honor the survivors who are here in our midst. You, the survivors, have taught us about being resilient, about resolve, and about being part of a community. I wish each of you good health and safety in these turbulent times, and I look forward to being together with you once again.
This program is possible because of the ongoing support of community sponsors, including members of the Glick and Liebman families, who, through the David and Rose Glick Yom HaShoah Endowment Fund, have supported the Yom HaShoah program since 1986. The David and Regina Weinberg Foundation, a supporting foundation of the Associated, and the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, for their support of both the Kristallnacht and Yom HaShoah commemorations. The Ponzak Greenblatt family's Holocaust Endowment Fund for the support of Holocaust education. The support and dedication of these families to Holocaust remembrance and education is vital and greatly appreciated. Thank you.
The theme of this year's Yom HaShoah commemoration is Remembering Liberation, the 75th anniversary. Both the victims and the Allied troops experienced liberation with mixed emotions. For the victims, it was like waking up from one long nightmare. For the troops, the sight of the thousands of tortured souls was beyond what they had ever witnessed as soldiers in combat. No one could have imagined the scale of the atrocities that had taken place under the Nazi regime. As we mark the 75th year of the liberation, we honor and remember the victims and the liberators, both witnesses to the purposeful and orchestrated brutality perpetrated by Nazi Germany against those deemed undesirable. All who came out of that darkness continue to implore the world to never forget. We will begin this part of our program with the video Liberators and Survivors, The First Moments, produced by Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center, for the purpose of Holocaust education and for ensuring that the history will not be forgotten.
The man came up to us and said, there's a factory about a mile down the road, and you will find a lot of Jewish women in there that were trapped there, and the SS is guarding them. We opened this shed, we went in there.
Though fighting still raged in the Pacific Theater, World War II in Europe officially ended with Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945. Allied armed forces advanced across Europe in the war's final stages, relentlessly pursuing the retreating German army. As they did, they stumbled onto camps, often accidentally, that had been established and run by the Nazis and their local collaborators. The Soviet army, advancing from the east, liberated Nazi camps in Poland, including Majdanek and Auschwitz. The British and Canadians, advancing from the west, liberated Bergen-Belsen and camps in northern Germany. The Americans, our focus here, liberated Dachau, Buchenwald, and other camps.
As their armies advanced across Europe, the Allies found thousands of people imprisoned in camps. They encountered piles of corpses and thousands of skeletal prisoners on the verge of death from malnutrition and disease. This was their first encounter with the horror of what would come to be known as the Holocaust. They began to understand that the Nazis had committed atrocities against civilians, the vast majority of them Jews, on an unimaginable scale, and that these atrocities were very different from the deaths caused by conventional warfare. A new category of crime had to be recognized to describe the intentional attempt to destroy a people. This crime came to be known as genocide. The soldiers were the very first outside witnesses of the Holocaust, an unprecedented case of genocide.
The testimonies of the first soldiers who entered the camps, known as the liberators, are important eyewitness accounts of the mass atrocities committed against the Jews of Europe by the Nazis and their collaborators. Hardened combat veterans, the American GIs were used to death. Many had been fighting for years, but they had never seen killings of civilians on the massive scale they discovered. Their first encounters with Holocaust survivors at this unique moment in time give us an essential and intensely human perspective on the difference between military war and genocide.
Leon Bass was 20 years old and was among the first U.S. soldiers to arrive at Buchenwald.
I can never forget that day, because when I walked through that gate, I saw in front of me what I call the walking dead. I saw human beings that had been beaten, had been starved, had been tortured. They'd been denied everything. They had skeletal faces with deep-set eyes. Their heads had been clean-shaved, and they were standing there, and they were holding on to one another just to keep from falling. I saw the clothing of little children, the little children that didn't survive. Up against the wall, there were mounds of clothing. I saw the caps, sweaters, the stockings, the shoes, but I never saw a child.
Harry Mogen was a Jewish refugee from Nazi persecution. He reached the United States and became a soldier and a liberator.
And you saw women on the floor, on wooden pallets. When I say women, you saw skeletons. Rags hanging on them, no shoes. Bones instead of faces, and the stench was so horrible. It's hard to describe.
What the American soldiers found at Ohrdruf, a subcamp of Buchenwald, was so grisly that General Dwight D. Eisenhower, then the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in Europe, together with Generals Patton and Bradley, arrived to inspect the camp for themselves. After his visit, Eisenhower cabled,
"The things I saw beggared description. The visual evidence and the verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were so overpowering as to leave me a bit sick. I made the visit deliberately in order to be in a position to give first-hand evidence of these things, if ever, in the future, there develops a tendency to charge these allegations merely to propaganda.
These words are now engraved on the wall of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C.
Eisenhower's eyewitness testimony reveals that what he saw at Ohrdruf left a powerful impression. Eisenhower foresaw the problem of disbelief that could fuel the denial of atrocities committed by the Nazis and their collaborators. He emphasized that he purposely witnessed these horrors so that no one would later be able to deny what he saw with his own eyes. Eisenhower was convinced that the world needed to know. He made sure that members of Congress and journalists were brought to see the camp. He had all nearby soldiers whose units were not on the front lines visit as well, writing, "We are told the American soldier does not know what he is fighting for. Now, at least, he will know what he is fighting against."
U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Horace Evers was among the first Allied soldiers to enter Adolf Hitler's abandoned Munich quarters. He discovered Hitler's personal stationery. He crossed out Adolf Hitler, inserted his own name, and wrote a letter home about the camp he had seen just outside of Munich.
Dearest Mom and Lou, a railroad runs alongside the camp, and as we walked toward the boxcars on the track, I thought of some of the stories I previously had read about Dachau, and was glad of the chance to see for myself, just to prove once and for all that what I had heard was propaganda. But no, it wasn't propaganda at all. If anything, some of the truth had been held back. In 2 years of combat, you can imagine I have seen a lot of death. Furious deaths, mostly. But nothing has ever stirred me as much as this. The first boxcar I came to had about 30 what were once humans in it. Bodies on top of each other. No telling how many. And then into the camp itself. Filthy barracks. How can people do things like that? I never believed they could. Until now.
As American troops approached Dachau, they saw ghastly evidence of recent mass prisoner executions. Anger led some to shoot SS guards still at the camp. But Dachau not only fueled their rage, it also aroused their compassion. Paul Parks was a 22-year-old American soldier from Indianapolis who witnessed Dachau after liberation.
These people came out of these barracks-like buildings, their striped uniforms on, and just in devastated shape. One of the fellows came out who spoke English, and he said, "Are you Americans?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Thank God," and he hit the ground and started to pray.
Who were the people that these soldiers found? They were the victims of Nazi ideology and hatred. The Jews among them had managed to survive the Holocaust, whose goal was total annihilation. Other prisoners, including Roma, homosexuals, and communists, had managed to survive persecution and murder. For many, liberation came too late. Hundreds continued to die every day of starvation, exhaustion, and disease. But for others, the soldiers were larger than life. They represented the moment of salvation that many survivors had despaired they might not live to see.
Helen Greenbaum survived imprisonment in the Warsaw Ghetto, forced labor at a number of camps, including Majdanek and Ravensbrück, and a death march to Dachau, where she was finally liberated.
They opened all the gates, and we started on all four, because they let us know that the soldiers are coming. And we went out to greet the American soldiers. And we dropped to their feet and we kissed their boots. Some of them that couldn't walk, they were just crawling. They picked up and carried them into the camps.
Some of the soldiers broke down and cried at the sight of the survivors. Many made the conscious decision to put their military objectives temporarily on hold in order to care for the broken and dying prisoners that they found. In most cases, the liberators treated them with sympathy and kindness. After the Germans had mercilessly stripped them of their dignity, the liberators were the first to restore their humanity.
Anton Mason was about 18 when he was liberated by American soldiers at Buchenwald. He had survived Auschwitz, where most of his family was murdered.
I found out my father was dead, and I was truly at the end of my rope. I said, I don't know if I can go on. But there is something that's just impossible to explain. I just decided that I'm not going to give up. I'm going to try. And then, out of no place, on April 11th, the Americans arrived. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I said, how is this possible? I walked over to a GI, and young guy, and I asked him if he could give me some food. I'm very hungry. So he gave me a Nestle bar, and he gave me a little gold envelope. It said Nescafe. I didn't know what it was. So he gave me a little food. Now, you know how much that food was worth? He could have gotten anything for it in Weimar, but he gave it to me.
Solly Gnor lay half dead in the snow after a death march from Dachau. He remembers the unshaven, tired soldier who knelt down, gently touched him on the shoulder, and said, "You're free, boy. You're free now." Solly was surprised by the soldier's Japanese features. His liberator, Clarence Matsumura, was a member of a segregated regiment of Nisei soldiers, American children of Japanese immigrants. Clarence smiled at Solly, a smile that stayed with him ever since. Solly has called Clarence his angel. Ironically, African-American GIs like Paul Parks and Leon Bass, and Japanese Americans like Clarence Matsumura, served in segregated units in the U.S. Army. They fought for freedom and democracy, despite facing discrimination at home and within the Army. Nisei soldiers celebrated the survivors' freedom, even though racial tension and fear during the war had caused many of their own families to be interned in camps in the U.S.
For countless survivors of the Holocaust, that first contact with the liberators was the moment they began to feel safe after years of fear, loss, and rupture. But for many, liberation was the saddest moment of their lives. It was the moment they realized they were completely alone in the world. For many liberators, their first contact with the survivors was a powerful moment of insight. Trained to wage war, many chose to suspend their military missions for the humanitarian mission of giving care and respect to the survivors. The experiences of the survivors and the liberators moved many to become a moral voice, sharing their stories.
I've been trying to give testimony for a long time by just going around and speaking to people. And I think it's important that I speak about what I saw and that others speak about what they saw. Are we looking for credit? No. No one's looking for credit. No one wants a pat on the back. All we want to do is say, will this be prevented from happening again? That's the most basic thing.
The Baltimore Jewish community was privileged to have its own liberator. Master Sergeant Sal Goldstein was born in Baltimore, Maryland on March 17, 1923. He enlisted in the U.S. Army on his 18th birthday. He fought in the European theater, assigned to the Big Red One, 1st Infantry Division. Among the campaigns he participated in were the invasion of Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge. In April 1945, Sal Goldstein and his unit came upon a satellite camp of Buchenwald. He was one of the first members of his unit to knock down the fence surrounding this camp. What he and his comrades witnessed was unimaginable. Because of his experiences at Buchenwald, the 22-year-old Master Sergeant vowed to himself that if ever a Jew were in trouble, he would help them, wherever they were. He kept that promise, visiting the Soviet Union 6 times to advocate on behalf of refuseniks, Jews who were denied permission to leave the country. He also traveled to Ethiopia, where he helped rescue Jews in that country from dire and oppressive conditions. Back in Baltimore, he worked tirelessly for the Jewish community. Part of his volunteer service was serving as president of the Baltimore Jewish Council, where he helped establish the Holocaust Remembrance Speakers Bureau and co-founded the Black Jewish Forum of Baltimore. Sal Goldstein was part of the Holocaust Remembrance Speakers Bureau and shared his story with thousands of students and others right up into his death in 2017. In 2010, he was interviewed by Goucher students as part of the course Oral History of Holocaust Survivors. The following is an excerpt from that interview in which Sal remembers his first encounter with a prisoner at Buchenwald.
Now, Buchenwald had, I think it was 3 satellite camps. Now, we were at one of the satellite camps. And when we saw these fencing, and one of my guys said, I think it looks like an entrance up there to the right. And I said, no, we're not going to go up there. We're going through the fence. So we plowed through the fence, tore it down, got inside. We jumped down off of our vehicles. Now you have to understand something. I was then 20 years old, I think, 21. And this was the 11th of April, 1944. And I was 6 feet 2 inches tall. I weighed 185 pounds. I didn't have an ounce of fat on me, and I'd fight it to drop a pin. And many a fist fight, many a fight I'd get into. I was in great shape. In my hands, I held a carbine. Rifle. It carries 30 shots in a clip. I had 60. I used to take the clips like this and put them together, and I'd put tar tape around them so that when I'd fire, put it on automatic and fire 30, I could just pull it out and flip it over and have another 30. Instead of just 30, I had 60. Learn all kinds of tricks. Yeah. I carried a 45 automatic pistol on my hip, and in my boot, I had a razor sharp knife I could shave with it. That's how sharp it was. That was in my boot. And I'm standing there like this, looking at these, what I thought were people, as they shuffled toward me, making noises and stuff. The stench was horrible. And a little man walked up to me with wooden shoes, his little striped hat in his hand. He looks at me, and he said to me in German, "Seid ein Amerikaner Soldat, jawohl?" Well, I understand German because I speak Yiddish. And I said to him, not in German, but in Yiddish, "Jawohl, wir sind Amerikaner Soldaten, und ich bin ein Yid." Yes, we're American soldiers, and I'm a Jew. He reached over and he grabbed my hands around that gun, and I was sort of petrified. He was about 4'10", 4'8". And he looked at me and in Yiddish, not in German, he said to me, "Was hat genommen so lang zu kommen?" What took you so long? What took you so long to get? Was hat genommen so lang zu kommen? What took you so long to get here? I completely dissolved. I began to cry. Tears were coming down my eyes because I could only think, he's right. What took us so long to get here? How did we let this happen?
We are fortunate to have a collection of testimony by Baltimore area survivors available through the Goucher College Library. These oral histories were recorded between 2004 and 2013 by students at Goucher College as part of the course Oral Histories of Holocaust Survivors. The following video consists of excerpts of these testimonies in which survivors recount their memories of liberation.
On May 8, 1945, Nazi Germany's surrender to the Allies became official, and Europe began to rise from Nazi domination. With the victory of the Allied troops, the survivors of Nazi terror could now emerge into the open. For the survivors, and especially the Jewish survivors, liberation was a mixed blessing, unbelievable relief, and profound sadness. While their suffering had come to an end, the survivors felt as if they were in limbo, alive but broken, free to move forward, but homeless and alone. Each had to begin a long and painful process of rehabilitation to heal body and soul and somehow return to life. These are the voices of Holocaust survivors in our community. Their stories continue to teach us about overcoming tremendous challenges and inspire us with hope for the future.
The feeling was when we knew almost that it's over, and we could see the airplanes from England or America, I don't know which one, were flying over, high over, to put phosphor down on the bigger cities. We just couldn't, I cannot express how we felt excited about it, seeing the actually finish of the war and that the Germans get their part, what they supposed to get, because they ruined so many lives. 6 million Jews perished.
When the bombardment stopped and the shelling stopped, all of a sudden, one of these forced laborers that were with us said, "Hey, you see there is a Russian soldier." And then I went and looked out through the window and I saw a little human eye. We were on the second floor. I see a small man running with a machine gun and puff, 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 shooting. And we became very happy. We were elated. We were yelling and screaming and shouting. And then we saw more soldiers coming and what have you.
We ran out. We ran to the first soldier. We hugged him and kissed him. Oh, and I didn't even realize yet that they were the British, you know. And we said, oh God, and they didn't even know what it was for me. For me, it was double freedom, you know, to be relieved of the thinking of that every day I could be taken.
But what I remember, like in a dream, that I heard some partisans singing like a Russian song. This is what I remember. And when they woke me up was a Russian soldier with a Czech partisan. They woke me up with some word and this, I got up and they took me back to the room. If you want something to eat there, you come there, which I didn't have even strength to walk. And I went back to the room there where I was, but it wasn't any more 30 people. It was about 15 left. That's all. They must have died or they took him away.
The Russians came, of course, when they saw us, Jewish girls survived. They couldn't believe it. So they, of course, they accused us of collaborating with the Germans. And here my Russian helped, and I said to him, just look at us, we look like collaborators, just bones covered with skin, that's all, there was no flesh on us.
But the sense of relief at the moment of liberation quickly gave way to the reality of their experience. It was hard to feel the victory. Hitler may have lost the war, but his victims had not won. Having been sentenced to die, the survivors had forgotten how to live. The magnitude of what they had lost was beyond comprehension. The years stolen from their lives, the deterioration of health, and the losses of home and family loomed over the survivors and cast a shadow over their ability to feel free. Hope gave way to fear for the future. Most had no home to return to, and if they did, they were unwelcome, even attacked. Frantic searches to find loved ones often ended in disappointment. There was no one left. What remained was the realization that they would not be returning to the life they had known.
It was a Sabbath, and on Saturday we were sitting, already came down from the attic and to our room on the first floor. And there was a certain group of Hungarian soldiers, they were called the Iron Guard. They joined the Hitler army to come to Germany. They were guarding Bergen-Belsen. And all of a sudden, on the afternoon on the Sabbath, a guard must have walked by, the window was open. He threw in a pack of cigarettes. You should see these people. For a dime for a cigarette. So this one wanted a cigarette, that one wanted a cigarette. So anyway, the normal time, you never saw this. A guard to go and just throw you in cigarettes. So you knew the time because at night when it was quiet, you could hear the explosives, the bomb. Not only the bomb, the artillery and so forth. And Sunday morning, somebody came out and said, "You people are liberated. We are not under anybody. We are liberated."
But you stayed there after you were liberated.
Where else you gonna go?
Finally, the so-called Day of Liberation came. The Day of Liberation is because I'm here, I'm telling the story. Not just my story, I'm telling all the ghosts that died, that were buried there and everywhere else. That is the only difference between me and that. What about all the ghosts that saw finally a little daylight? They could rejoice that they were liberated, and they died after liberation. When the English came in, they gave us a can of bacon, a can of sweet condensed milk. I ate it, and many of us did, if not all of us. And what we got, we were not used to that kind of food. We got dysentery, diarrhea. So we were dehydrated. Everything went flush through our bodies. And we all had typhus. And that's a terrible combination. So people kept on dying. I was as close to being dead as anyone can be and still be here telling the story.
Stalin at that time said that all the people that were born in Poland can go back. And we were sort of like liberated from Russia to go back to Poland. There was nobody left in Poland. All our families from my father's side and from my mother's side were all annihilated by Hitler. So we couldn't stay in Poland. At that time, a lot of people came already from Israel, and they started to organize so that the people would have someplace to go. They put the children into a kibbutz, and this is where I and my sister, who was still very little at the time, and my two older brothers, we went into this kibbutz in Stettin.
But we survived, the war ended, and we decided to get back home. And it was a long journey for us, but we came into Poland. When we arrived in Poland, we had no idea what was going on in Poland during the war. We thought, because in Russia they didn't let us, they didn't get in the newspapers, they didn't write about what the Germans were doing to the Jewish people. So when we came back to Poland, we were hoping to find our extended relatives who lived in different little towns, but then when we came into Poland, we realized that they were all killed.
When the war ended in 1945, it was good that we knew it was ended, but it was all tempered with the uncertainty of what had happened to my family. Right. I still wanted to know what had happened to my family.
Unable to return home, many survivors lived in displaced persons camps, where they could take the first steps in the painful process of rebuilding their lives. Inside these camps, they faced continuing challenges of disease, anti-Semitism, and lack of a permanent home. Still, there were signs of healing and life. Slowly, the sick were nursed back to health. Plans began to be made, and new families were established. Eventually, survivors made their way to new lands, most to America or Palestine, the land that would soon become the nation of Israel. In time, they learned to live again, raising their families, joining communities, and looking toward the future with hope.
When the English came, the first thing my sister and I did, we went to the government what they made, English, and we changed to our real names because we have been on false papers. So that was our first thing. My name is Atlin before I married was Krieger. So we changed our real names. We felt really good about it. But you can understand it was good.
When the war was over, it was like, I felt I'm like newborn and didn't know what the future will be after the war.
If I would go around angry, bitter today, Hitler would have killed me, psychologically, not physically. And he would have won over me, and I cannot allow this to happen. I look forward to tomorrow. Do I have some moments where I am depressed? Of course, we're human. But basically, I am a pretty happy guy and live to the future. And as bad as it was, I never, ever entered my mind to give up.
Their recovery and return to life was nothing less than a miracle and a profound statement about survival and the strength of the human spirit. We are grateful for their words of wisdom that will continue to inspire future generations to safeguard life, to protect human rights, and to defend human dignity everywhere.
Strength of flesh
As we look at this memorial candle, we remember all who perished in the Shoah, the survivors who are no longer with us, and the liberators who were among the first to see the victims of Nazi cruelty.
שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, כנפי השכינה. במהלוד קדושים ודהורים כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים את נשמות אחינו בני ישראל הקדושים והטהורים שנהרגו, שנשחטו ושנרצחו על ידי הנאצים יימח שמם ונשפכו דמם על קדושת השם בעבור שאנחנו בניהם ובנותיהם אחיהם ואחיותיהם מתפללים בעד אזכרת נשמותיהם בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסדר כנפיו לעולמים ויצלו לביצלה לחיים את נשמותיהם אדוני הוא נחלתם וימנוחו בשלום על משכבתם ונאמר יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
We thank our viewers for joining us today. Due to this year's unusual circumstances with the coronavirus pandemic, many community events had to be postponed, changed, or canceled. However, as Jews, we are committed to coming together to remember the Shoah and honor the witnesses. Although a live community event could not happen, a new kind of memorial could. With dedication and vision, the Holocaust Remembrance Commission took on the challenge to present our traditional ceremony in a new way. Thank you to everyone who worked so diligently to reimagine this commemoration as a virtual event so that our community could continue to mark this special day together. Thank you.